All right. So we're going to be focused today on Objective 1, which introduces you to the big part of Chapter 3, which is all about process costing. So you're going to be learning a little bit about this and how it compares to the job order costing system that you just learned from Chapter 2. Okay. So the process cost systems basically apply to costs with similar products that are very much mass produced. Okay. So, for example, in this case, you have soft drinks, right? So, for things like Coke or Pepsi, everything is sort of put into a large tank with and blended accordingly. Then it goes into filling stations, and then it gets to be packaged and ready to go. But basically, all of these are similar products, and the process is quite, simple in essence, and so it's not a big deal. The same would be true for the production of cereals, for the production of paint, believe it or not, for the production of steel as well as oil refining products. Okay. So again, job order cost systems are very common for various companies that have very specific products that they could assign to specific jobs. So whether it's an advertising product or a movie or other types of things, patient care, for example, a job order cost system probably works quite well for these types of companies. For other types of companies, what's going to work for them is a process cost system. So whether it's soft drinks or computer chips or chemicals, it's a similar product with a similar process, and so it makes it easier for them to use the process cost system. Okay. So which is the following is not a characteristic of a process cost system. Once it begins, it continues till it merges. The focus is continually producing homogeneous products. When the product emerges, all units precisely the same amount of material, labor, and overhead. The products produced are okay. So here's the two basic thing, right? So these are products that are the same type of product versus very different types of products. And so for process costing, it works for all of them except if the products are different, right? And so D would be the proper answer here. So service companies can use this particular cost system, but they normally provide services that are quite individualized, that are not at all very routine. So they usually tend to gravitate toward a job order cost system. But there are some companies that perform very routine, repetitive services and thus could use a process cost system. Okay. So remember, for the job order cost system, the costs are assigned to each specific job, and those products are unique. For process cost system, the costs are tracked through lots of a big process or departments, but the product will come out looking the same. Okay, and they'll be producing large volumes of that product. So comparison here, the job order flow that you learned about in chapter 2 starts with those direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. They get assigned to work in process inventory per job, right? And then once each of those jobs are completed, the inventory gets moved to finished goods inventory, and thus they're ready to be sold to customers, so they'll eventually be transferred to cost of goods sold. What you'll notice that's different about process cost is the direct materials, labor, and manufacturing overhead will be allocated by department, by process, and it's usually by department. This department does this, then it moves to this other department, they do that, then kind of goes on. So that's because they're working on all products that are similar. There's no need to do them in individual job order, right? They can be process cost. And so this is where you're going to find the biggest difference here in this chapter. That's going to be different from the last one. But then it's going to be very similar, right? Once Department A puts its parts together, sends that over to Department B, they put their parts together, it's ready to go, right? Finished goods inventory, and then it's ready to be sold, and it gets transferred. So this is basically going to be the big difference in this chapter versus the previous chapter. Okay. So again, there are some similarities in the systems from chapter 2 to here. Again, it's used very heavily in manufacturing. They do start by accumulating materials, labor, and overhead, and they use that flow that I just went over with you in the last slide. However, there's a lot of differences here. So the number of accounts used are going to be a little bit more. The documents that are used to track everything is going to be different. Where we actually total up the costs at what point, those are going to be a little bit different. And we're able to calculate a unit cost based on all of this type of stuff that you'll see. So here is the illustration that comes right from your book, showing that in terms of work in process, right, in the job order cost system, we only used one work in process account. For this particular chapter, we'll be using multiple accounts. Okay. The documents that we used for the job order cost system were those job cost sheets. The documents that we're using are production cost reports that you're going to be learning about. We determine all the costs for each job in the job order system. In this chapter, we're going to look at costs on a period basis. Okay. And then when you look at the unit costs for a job order system, the cost of each job divided by the units produced for that particular job, that's the cost basis here. But in the process costs basis system, it's the total manufacturing costs divided by what we call equivalent units produced. So you're going to be learning about what that means later in the chapter as well. Okay. So basically, this is your introduction to learning objective 1 in this chapter. And they end it with their do it exercise in a true false situation. See, a law firm is likely to use a process cost system for major lawsuits. Well, that's not true. It's going to be very specific. So they're going to probably use a job order cost system, not a process cost. A manufacturer of paintballs is likely to use the process cost system. So if all they're spitting out is paintballs, then chances are that works better for them. Right? Both job order and process costing determine product costs at the end of a time period rather than when the product is completed. Well, no, both of them do not do that. Okay. The process cost system does it at the end of a period. Job order does it per job. Process cost system does not keep track of manufacturing overhead. This is also false. They all keep track of manufacturing overhead, as you'll see. So that's the introduction to learning objective 1 in chapter 3. That's what we're going to be doing next, is learning about